This is No Hate Radio.
I'm no stranger to the rain. Oh, no. I'm no stranger to the rain.
Now, this is No Hate Radio, and you are listening to No Hate Radio today on October 22nd, 2024. As I've said in recent times when we've come on the air, I've said we don't normally make a big deal out of what specific date it is, but this time, through the American Political Landscape series and because of a lot of very time-specific things, I think it's important for context for us to outline here and to say what we're going to say in the context of the day that we're saying it. Again, October 22nd, 2024. We're 13 days to the final day of the election cycle. In other words, Election Day, November 5th, 2024, major national election with many, many state offices, many federal and state and county and local offices on the ballot, many propositions on the ballot, some of which involve very important, I guess, and long-standing and highly controversial issues like protection of right to choose or abortion ordinance, statutes and other matters. So this is a election, I guess, to use kind of common vernacular about it, it's a big deal. It's a very, very big deal for America. Most everybody will always say, well, this is the most important election of our time, or they'll make statements like that as a part of rhetoric. But I submit to you, those of you who may be listening to No Hate Radio, that it's never been more true that the election cycle in which we currently are experiencing happens to be one of the most important elections of our time. Also here in Florida and in the southeastern United States, all the way up into western North Carolina and even into Virginia, we have just gone through horrific, extreme weather events, which have caused massive damage, loss of life, caused destruction of infrastructure systems. And it's clear that it will be a protracted and very difficult process to try and recover from the extreme weather events that we've just gone through. Here in Florida, I hear it often referred to as the 1-2 punch of Helene and Milton, which were on the heels 1 year ago of Hurricane Ian. So this part of the country, we have been massively hammered by the events and the tropical weather patterns. This goes on at the same time as this major election cycle goes on. So since this is kind of the wrap-up of the pre-election series on the American political landscape, I want to approach today in a little different way. We have talked mainly about specific issues that relate to the campaign, issues that are, I think, directly involved on the ballot or are directly involved in the campaigns of the respective candidates and what effect that might have on us and so forth. We're going to do something a little different, a little more global today. We're going to talk about these things in a bigger context, a more personal context in a way, because we're looking at a different way to internalize and deal with all the things we've been hearing and all the things we've been seeing in the last month or two, particularly since we stacked the extreme weather event on top of the massively important election cycle. One of the things that we have in common, I think, a commonality of experience, is that as we go through this major election, for most of us, we realize that there is little impact that we as an individual can have. We are watching what is occurring in the political landscape of America. We are seeing it go on. We are seeing it play itself out in a way that makes us all, or maybe not all, but certainly this speaker makes me feel removed and disconnected from any kind of influence over the political landscape in America on an individual basis. The same thing, the same commonality of experience applies when we talk about extreme weather. Extreme weather that develops, and there's not one thing a person can do except we hear constantly, you prepare or you evacuate or you do whatever you are planning to do to try and survive it, but not necessarily do anything about it. So these events around us, and I'll add another one, global wars that are going on now that are huge in impact. Israel, Lebanon, Iran, of course, Gaza, the start of it all, Hezbollah, other non-governmental actors, and the massive loss of life and suffering and humanitarian disaster that's going on. And we watch it, we see it, we know about it, but we find that there is little or nothing that we can do to impact any of it. So what are these common things that we all have to deal with? I'm going to maintain today on our No Hate Radio podcast today that we have to look at all these things if we're individuals and if we're not people in positions of power and influence, if we're not people who control public offices, if we're not people who have massive economic power, if we are the most of us and the ones who we encounter on a daily basis, because most of us are simply individuals trying to understand, cope with, and deal with what's going on around us. I think the common responses I want to address, and I want to address them in the context of all these events, are the concepts of fear and courage. Now, fear is a commodity. Fear is marketed. It is used. Fear is a thing, an emotion that is pushed on and pushed out and evoked and causes us to feel the feelings of fear based on inputs that come into our being. For the most of us, fear arises out of feelings of hopelessness, arises out of fears of vulnerability. Vulnerability to what? Vulnerability to loss, to death, to destruction, to something bad happening to us or to our loved ones or to our property or our lives, destructions of our career. So fear is a powerful motivator, and fear is used by those who want to cause people to act in a certain way. It's designed around capitalizing, as it were, on that emotion of fear that drives us all to dark places, to very dark places. And I'm going to use some examples here in the political campaign, in that context. We've all heard and seen the ads. Of course, we're all drowning right now in visual stimulus and audio stimulus. But what do you hear? You hear fear of the other, fear of immigrants, people who are not described, but in some way they're different. And these immigrants are described as subhuman, as being criminals and rapists and murderers and all sorts of degrading kinds of comments about people. And they're put in a category of immigrants, and these immigrants are all taking America by storm and causing a loss of jobs and loss of economic benefit and perpetrating crime and all those things. And the more that is sold, the more that is pushed on us, the more that is visually constantly placed before us, the more it can have an impact of driving a feeling of helplessness and vulnerability. Somehow, many of us, I think, would develop a mental concept of the descending horde taking over our lives and our communities. And that's actually marketed. It's actually developed and psychologically built into campaign strategies, such as the completely uncorroborated, absolutely untrue item that's designed to cause people to have abhorrent thoughts, such as immigrants are eating your pets or something like that. These things are very, very harmful, and they promote fear and they escalate fear. And we deal with fear out of these stimuli, which are designed to cause us to think that unknown, uncharted, secret, covert forces are occurring in our lives around us, and that we are the victims, and that we have to be protected by whoever it is that's selling us this fear motivation. Some fears, I think, are certainly legitimate. Climate change, extreme weather. And what drives that fear is that it is apparently true and accurate that those things are present, and they are increasing, and they are an existential threat, and yet none of us individually can do anything about that. What's another kind of fear? Fear that you have in combat. Let's say you're in the military and you've gone to Afghanistan, or you've gone to Iraq, or you've been in the Middle East somewhere in Lebanon. You've been assigned around the world, and you've seen all kinds of combat activity, and it evokes a visceral kind of fear in you because it's imminent death. It's suffering and death. That kind of fear is easy for everybody to understand. But what about the other kind of fear? What about the fear that because one is perceived as a substandard class, that their harm, suffering, or death won't be considered as important, and that therefore there is no protection of the law? There is no knight in shining armor for you, because you are considered less of a person. Those fears are generated when people do things designed to increase that and to emphasize that and to point it up. An example was the era of the Jim Crow laws. They were designed to elicit fear as a response, fear of, quote, getting out of line, fear of being killed or being harmed or damaged or having your house burned, fear of unknown and secretive organizations like the Ku Klux Klan or the White Citizens Council. And today, I suggest to you that fears of the neo-Nazi movement and the ultra-right-wing white separatists and other organizations, they create a lot of fear, and they create fear inordinately among persons who are the victim classes. Now, I don't like to use necessarily the word victim because that has all kinds of connotations we don't want we don't want to create, but let's say the target classes of these hate groups. And we need to understand that those things are out there and they are real, but they are also promoted, developed, created, and developed into a large-scale threat that is supposed to cause you to be afraid and to seek protection from whoever it is that's selling this game. Now, all of us experience fear. Someone pulls out in front of you at an intersection and you can only barely stop and you slam on the brakes and you have a near collision, then you're going to have some fear. That's realistic fear. But sustained fear based on the actual or proposed or conceived or in fact invented false, not really real, supposed future actions of others, that fear drives us. And it drives us at the time of a massive election. It drives us at the time of a massive extreme weather event. It drives us at a time when we're out in a vulnerable position because we happen to be on the front line of a combat unit. It drives us if we are standing up to power. And I'll use civil rights movement examples like that. Not necessarily the best known ones like Dr. Martin Luther King, who we all know, and the stories of the Selma Montgomery bus boycott and all of the things that happened in the civil rights movement. That required overcoming of fear because there was massive fear marketed by those in power, and the purpose of it was to keep fear always in the forefront so that people would not seek to change what was then a status quo. We are faced with that same kind of time again, but this time the target audience may be others. It may be queer persons. It may be persons of transgender. It may be certainly it's immigrants of any class. It may be persons of just minority background or ethnic background. It may be persons of certain religious organizations. We've seen a serious uptick in anti-Semitic behavior, Jewish behavior, Jewish violence being perpetrated on people here in this country. So fear is a big commodity in the fall of 2024. Please don't think that fear is some old concept that happened in World War II or Korea or the Vietnam War or the Civil Rights Movement of the 60s or the feminist movement of the 60s. No. Fear is a commodity being marketed today. It's being marketed and sold today. And it's designed to drive people's actions, specifically on the political front, to drive people's votes in an election. Many times people will seek to tell a hyperbolic story. They will go on the TV screen and say, for example, in Florida, there is a proposition on the ballot to constitutionally protect the right to choose for women and to set aside an abortion ban and so forth. A long-standing, long-debated, hotly controversial issue, of course. And yet when you see the TV ads, they're based on fear. We're going to have wholesale abortions of teenagers with no parental consent. Now, the fact that is not factually true and has no basis in fact and controverts existing law, the other side tries to counter the argument and say, here's the law, here it is. It does not do away with parental consent law. This is not true, and yet it's being sold. Late-term abortions, unregulated, creating a concept, a belief, a mindset in people that there will be this wholesale horde of teenagers rushing to the abortion doctors to have abortions, and huge numbers, and their parents will be not even mindful of it. Not to mention the fact the amendment itself has a requirement for parental notification and does not set aside the statutory requirement for parental consent. But that's what we're doing is we're operating our entire political system today, unfortunately, on wholesale misrepresentations of material fact designed to evoke fear, to cause fear to drive people's votes. We have video pictures of clamoring people at the border. Incidentally, if you look at the border today, it's empty. There is no such thing. But that fear, nonetheless, is the target. That's what the sellers of it want you to see. So fear, and this is not something new. I'm not trying to suggest that. Fear, in fact, was the absolute cornerstone of the Third Reich, of Hitler's regime in Germany, pre and during World War II. Fear that you'd be killed, fear that you would be scooped up and taken off, fear that your property would be stolen, fear. All of it was real once they took control. But fear drives us. So what is the antidote to fear? Can we think clearly, rationally, and objectively when we are overwhelmed with fear? Probably not. Somehow we have to stop ourselves. We have to put the brakes on the emotion of fear, back up and say, okay, what does my brain tell me is true or not true about this fear? Is it a real fear, and is it something I can do something about? And what do I need to do? The logic process is barricaded by high levels of fear. So one of the things we study, or at least I have studied, and I know many great authors and people that have read their materials have studied, is courage. Now, is courage the absence of fear? No. That, if you believe it, I submit to you, friends, is wrong. Courage is not the absence of fear. Recklessness is the absence of fear, but courage is not. Courage is doing what needs to be done. Courage is facing the adversity. Courage is doing is responding with the right actions, even when you're under a great amount of fear. And a statement was made one time, more than one time, but I think the primary, I'd like to give credit to whoever originated the statement, but I honestly don't know. It is this. Many people think that courage is represented by the acts taken by extraordinary people. The fact is that courage is defined as extraordinary acts by ordinary people. Because nobody, no rational person, no person with a balanced sense of self and mind can totally escape fear. What you do is overcome it. So let me try to put that in the context of what we're talking about today. The last in the American political landscape. The campaigns today, one of the campaigns is based on some of the following statements by the campaign leader, including these. On the first day, I will pardon everyone from January 6th. On the first day, I have good cause to seek retribution against my political enemies. On the first day this, on the first day that. So the statements are made to suggest that if you have the courage to call out what you believe is wrong, either by vote or by speech or by campaign contribution or by other public action that opposes the viewpoint of the person who would rule by iron hand instead of law, that you have real good cause to be scared. You have real good cause to be afraid, and that you should not exercise the urge for courage. You should not voice that opinion that you know that what is being said is wrong. You should stand back. You should prevent yourself from being at risk. Prevent yourself from being harmed. Prevent yourself from being the target of that power that seeks to drive your actions by fear. In the not Soviet Union, in Russia today, political dissidents of the Putin regime are regularly poisoned, sent to prison, killed, regularly. It's known around the world that these things are happening. And yet, for the average Russian citizen, it probably evokes great fear, to the point that the last thing they would do would be actually voice a reservation or oppose the power structure for fear of what? Fear of death, fear of property deprivation, fear of imprisonment, fear of everything you can think of that's bad. Courage you often think of in terms of combat. You think in terms of military engagements where someone exhibits just uncommon, unbelievable, against all logic kind of courage. Normally, as described in the citation for Medals of Honor issued in the United States, taking that action against and at great danger and disregarding one's own protection. That's, a high level of that military courage. But let's say that you're not a person standing on the Edmund Pettus Bridge in Selma, Alabama, facing Sheriff Jim Clark and a whole bunch of other people with guns. Let's say you're not there. That's not what you're doing. But let's say that you're a church secretary for an AME church in the South, and you're a political activist because you know some things that are going on are just wrong, and you want to do something about it, but you're a member of the community, and you're stuck in a Jim Crow South, and you have a choice. You can either go to the back of the bus, like the folks in power tell you have to do because you're black, or you can say no. And if you say no, you know that there's going to be some consequences. Probably going to get arrested, probably going to go to jail, may get beat up, different things may happen to you, all bad. So you're faced with a choice. Fear and subject to fear, or courage. Am I going to say no? Am I going to say this is wrong? Am I going to say I am going to stand up? I'm going to make a stand right here. If you're Rosa Parks, that's what you do. If you're Dr. Martin Luther King, you do what he did. If you're a person of color in Watts, Los Angeles, South LA, 1965, in the riots, you're either going to run for cover, you're going to hide, you're going to hope it's all over pretty soon, or you're going to stand up. You're going to say, this is wrong. Can't do this. Let's say you're a gay person, New York City, Stonewall, and you've been rousted over and over and over and over again by the NYPD, whose policy it was just to rouse the gay bars all the time on status offenses. One day, do you say, no, I don't think so. I don't think so, because it's not right. And I'm going to say it's not right. So when we get into studies of profiles in courage, we're not studying people who are fearless. Believe me, we're not studying people who are fearless. We're studying people whose convictions and beliefs about what's fundamentally right and wrong, studying people who take the position that whatever the risk, this has to be said. This has to be done. And friends, it's going to get harder to do that. It's going to get significantly harder to do that depending on the outcome of the November 2024 election. It's either going to get more reasonable, more rational, more unified, more honest, or it's going to get tough, really tough. And fear, I have been told by people who I've talked to who I have great respect for, one of whom is an MD psychiatrist in Texas, one of whom is a PhD psychologist. And they both told me that fear and anger are cheap emotions. They come quick, they stay there, they escalate with or without rational cause, and they drive behavior. Anger, same way. Comes quick, stays long, escalates without cause. What's the ultimate outcome? Fear causes suppression, fear causes oppression, fear causes massive social destruction. Anger causes violence, causes people to die, causes property to be destroyed. The courage, there is a prayer, I think it is, I don't know if it belongs to Alcoholics Anonymous or if they just use it. But it says, the words are, Lord, grant me the power to change the things that I can change, to accept the things that I cannot change. And this is the most important line of it all. And the wisdom to know the difference. Where we are right now in this country is at a pivotal point, in my opinion. This is the opinion of No Hate Radio's facilitator and not necessarily anybody else. It is this. As we go forward in 2024 and people look back from a future time, it will either be remembered as a time of fear, suppression, oppression, and narrow thinking and restrictions and the inability for self-expression. Or it will be remembered as a time when the nation started climbing out of a hole. Will Rogers, who's one of my favorite humorists, was fond of saying, first, when you find yourself in a hole, first thing you do is stop digging. Are we going to stop digging or not? I don't know. But it's a long way. Courage is a long way from being exhibited only in the face of gunfire, only in the face of combat situations. Courage is often displayed as the willingness to reach out in compassion and humanitarian kindness in the face of people who don't want you to do that. And that's, in many cases, that's where we are today. Think of the homeless issue and think of how different people approach it, and different people will describe to you, quote, the homeless, as though it's some monolithic thing. On one of the prior episodes of No Hate Radio, I think we pointed out, and I hope you read it or I'll listen to it or we'll go do it now, that there is no monolithic homeless person. Homelessness results from societal causes that it would take lots of episodes of No Hate Radio and other places to fully evaluate. We like to be in the blame game. We like to say that things are someone else's fault. I submit to you, out of all of this I'm talking about today, you've recently experienced two massive things, and one of them's ongoing right now. Both of them are actually ongoing. Recovery from an extreme weather event that none of us could control, and the pendency of an election that will change the direction of America. Friends, you're either going to approach it with fear, step back, hunker down, hide, hope they don't come get you. That's something we say in Texas for come get you. We're going to hope that. Or you're going to say, no, I'm done. We're going to show some courage here. We're going to stand up. We're going to say no. We're going to say we want America. Now, I want you to listen to this, because the concepts of the flag and patriotism and America and who's a real patriot and all that has been so mixed up in recent times. Go read the first paragraph of the Declaration of Independence, and then go read the intro paragraph of the United States Constitution. It's not long. Read them both. And then tell me where America ought to try to go. Because we've never been there yet. But until recent times, we have at least tried to go there. Have we been involved as a nation in assassinations? Yes. Have we been involved in Jim Crow laws? Have we been involved in oppression of minorities? Have we done a lot of bad stuff? Yes, if we'll be honest about it. But we always had a goal. We always had a goal to be an exceptional America. And either come 2025, America will be defined by Project 2025. I hope not. Or it will be defined as a time when we looked back, introspected, evaluated ourselves, and tried to get better. So on our ongoing theme of why and what are we going to do about it, why we are where we are has a lot to do, massive amount to do with power, greed, influence, financial gain, and concepts that only brute force counts. That's why. What are we going to do about it? We're either going to deal with it from a viewpoint of fear, or we're going to have some courage and we're going to beg, steal, or borrow a little sunshine. We're going to find a way to have a little sunshine. It can happen either way. I want to thank you for listening to this episode of No Hate Radio. Tell us if there's something that, send us an email. Go on our website, nohateradio.com. nohateradio.com. My producer just looking at me. Yeah, that's right. nohateradio.com. Go on that website. Send us your suggestions. Tell us what you think we need. Come the end of this election cycle, where would you like to see us go on No Hate Radio? Ultimately, one thing's going to happen. The election's going to be over. It's going to be over. We're going to be living in a world defined in some way or another. So let's send it to us. Say, hey, No Hate Radio, do this. It's on our website, nohateradio.com. Or call. We have this line. We have this recording line you can call. And when you get it, when you dial it, on some phones it'll come up saying it's from Camp Pendleton, California. It's not. It's our No Hate Radio line, and it's 442 No Hate Radio, or 442 No Hate. 442 No Hate. Kim, thank you for reminding me of that. I don't dial the number much, so 442 No Hate is where you want to call. You can do the same thing. If you don't have time to go on the deal and type in something for us, then certainly do it on the phone. Kim picks up those messages. He knows what people, whoever calls in, and we'll try to address that on the air. And the final message for those of you listening to No Hate Radio, at the time you listen to this episode, whether it's the day it comes out, which incidentally I believe is going to be the Saturday before Election Day on November 5th. If it's then that you listen to it, great. If you listen to it some other time, try to evaluate. I beseech you to do this. Try to evaluate whether you are mostly driven in these times, in these circumstances, with this kind of stimulus. Are you mostly driven by fear, or are you trying to overcome it with courage? Because courage requires integrity. And see, fear and anger being cheap emotions, courage and integrity are expensive. Thanks for listening. This is No Hate Radio.